His latest book, investigative journalist Gerald Posner takes an inside look at what was one of the most powerful record companies of its time, Motown. According to Posner, while Berry Gordy and his company churned out hits from the likes of Diana Ross and the Supremes, Michael Jackson, and Stevie Wonder, behind the scenes, jealousy, drugs, and greed helped tear the music dynasty apart. The story's told in Motown: Music, Money, Sex, and Power. Gerald Posner, good morning. Good to have you back.
Oh, good to see you, Matt.
There have been, I think, a dozen books on Motown. What's in this book that wasn't in those?
Well, the other books were basically autobiographies by the stars, or they were Gordy's own book. They were whitewashes. They were what people wanted you to think about the stars themselves in their own presentation. Or they were books, Matt, done by music critics. This is the first time an independent journalist has come in and told the real story that turns out to be part Greek tragedy, part soap opera.
However, if Motown was Berry Gordy's baby, how can you do a book like this without speaking directly to Berry Gordy?
Well, because all you're going to get from Berry Gordy is what he wants to tell you, which is the good thing. What I wanted as a reporter was warts and all. And so I got into something that nobody had ever been into before, and those are the court records in Detroit, in the basement of the main courtroom, where every good Motown relationship ended up finally in a lawsuit.
There were lawsuits like crazy.
Thousands of pages that open up what really happened behind the scenes. It's a remarkable story.
In the 70s and the 60s, I guess, the story was Motown's a family, and Berry Gordy's the dad. In reality, what was it?
Well, in the beginning, a lot of people felt that because these were kids. We have to remember, the Supremes were teenagers in high school. Mary Wells was only 16 years old. Little Stevie Wonder was 10 when they found him. The Jackson 5 were only kids. Michael Jackson was 10. So Gordy was only in his 30s. Was, in fact, like a father figure to
them. So it was a family, but it was a dysfunctional family.
It got dysfunctional with a capital D. And then when the stars got to the top of their game, and they were hitting #1, and they wanted a little bit of independence, Gordy couldn't give them that freedom. And that's where the real problem started to get created.
Can you overestimate how important Motown was for black artists during that time?
No, it was the label. As a matter of fact, Gordy used to say that he wasn't making black music. He was making music with black stars, and he was targeting it toward a white audience. Motown sold more to whites than anybody else. This was a real crossover album. And many of the black artists under Gordy were treated just as badly as if they had been signed to a black label. So he wasn't doing anything for them as a black owner that was different or special.
There was a lot of rivalry among these stars. Again, once they reached the top position, they wanted to be the star, they wanted the attention, and Berry Gordy had to move it around. Let me give you a couple of names and tell me what came up in your book about that person. Diana Ross and the Supremes.
Diana Ross and the Supremes, she's capital D diva. She invented the word, as a matter of fact. Matt, there's a point in which you talk about rivalries. She almost runs down a rival. Gladys Horton and the Marvelettes. One night, Diana, in a station wagon, runs the station wagon within inches of Gladys in a little blind kid that she's crossing the street with. Gladys Horton goes crazy. She runs around to the side of the car, and Diana Ross flips her the finger and keeps going on. This is not a nice woman in the end.
And we should just mention that Diana Ross facing some difficulties these days, set to go to court on a DUI charge. So she was not liked by the other artists in Motown?
Not liked at all. As a matter of fact, there's a moment they do a duet with Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye refuses to actually record the duet with her because he doesn't want to be in the same room with her. He's smoking marijuana at the time. She's pregnant, doesn't want to be with him. There's rivalries all the way along, and they don't get along together very well at a point.
You mentioned Marvin Gaye, who I have to say is one of my favorite artists of all time, and you talk about some of the circumstances surrounding his death.
Marvin Gaye happens to have my favorite songs on Motown. He's remarkable. His talent is so great. He wanted to be a crooner, sort of like Frank Sinatra, but he turns out this music that we listen to today that sounds current. The problem is, the more that I got into Marvin Gaye's life, not only was I surprised by his own drug abuse, but the fact that he was abusive to other people, sexually abusive, and he had demons. He had a dark side. And in the end, the day before his 45th birthday, in April 1st, 1984, he's killed by his own father, a prominent Pentecostal preacher in Washington, D.C., who it turns out had a secret life as a transvestite. You couldn't make this material up. Motown had these unusual facets to its history.
Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, did they save the record label during some very difficult times?
They prolonged the demise of the record label. They came alive in the 70s when Gordy was only about movies. He wanted to do Lady Sings the Blues. He was focusing on his lover, Diana Ross. They were lovers for years, and he wanted to make her into a real star. Along come the Jackson 5 when he's not paying any attention to the music end of the business, and they have 5 consecutive #1 hits. They bring Gordy up to the top, but then he loses them by not paying enough attention to them.
Well, there are a lot of artists who, at some point or another, claim that Berry Gordy and Motown took advantage of them, didn't give them their correct share in terms of royalties. But let's be honest here, you hear that an awful lot in the music industry, not just with Motown Records.
No, that's right. You think this is the same old song. I hear it all the time. I hear it with Mariah Carey, whatever else. But there's a difference with Motown, which is they were like the studio system in Hollywood. They not only had the records out for all the artists, but they represented them as management. They did their own taxes. They did everything for them. These artists lived together. There were no lawyers or agents around. Gordy, when you went to sign with him, wouldn't let you walk out of Motown with the contract unless you signed on the spot.
And there were allegations that in some cases Motown Records was listing certain sales of records as discounted records when in fact they were full price records. In other words, to find a way to cut the royalties to their artists.
As a matter of fact, the San Francisco Chronicle yesterday did a review on the book in which they called that chapter called Suitcases of Cash a bombshell. And I think that's the real news from here, which is sort of the scheme that they operated on, which may have ripped the artists off, put money in their pockets, and also had payola at the same time.
Has any of that been proven?
The fellow who made the allegations under sworn statements, now dead. Nobody else confirms it. Everybody else that he accused does exactly what you expect, Matt. Not me. I know nothing about it.
Gerald Posner. The book is called, I have it right over here, Motown, Music, Money, Sex, and Power. Gerald Posner. Good to have you back.
Great to see you, Matt.